Gender roles. Yeah, we're going to do that. And we're going to talk about, is there a such thing? Loose change. Bundy, 718. And we're going to just have to go right into it about gender roles, because I was thinking about this. And I never understood the offense a lot of people get when we talk about gender roles. Because for you to know that you operate outside of gender roles, there'd have to be a set gender role. People don't understand. It defines itself. You might not like it, but you should. Because what it also does is validate your own hyper-subjective gender. How would you even be able to define your gender if there wasn't, genders wasn't something that you would have to define? Your argument would have to be that there's no such thing as a definable gender. And that's cool. You operate outside of it. But guess what? In this world, we have gender. So if you operate outside it, then that's something more of a belief system. It's not something that's scientifically quantitative, because you'd have to provide that. And since we don't know any science that provides that there is no gender, let's just go off the argument that gender is a man-made idea. Then the question will remain is, if there's no science, such thing as a scientific gender, then it's an adjective, kind of like a two-spirited gender, if you will, if that exists. Because like I said, if for that to exist, and for a two-spirited gender to have to exist, it have to have a role of sorts, a way that it differentiates itself from everything else. Because it's interesting that male and female genders actually define themselves against each other. Two-spirited genders and all of these other spectrum genders, which, as valid as it may seem, is the only one of those genders that do not define itself against anything else. But I'm sure each person can define each gender that is continuously growing. And I have no argument to suggest that that's not a fact. All I know for one thing is that those genders have not been scientifically, quantitatively proven. It's more in the realm of conjecture, thought extrapolation, philosophy, kind of theoretical. You know what I'm saying? Hypothetical. Educated guesses, if you will. And not to say that there's no validity in any of these things, or there can't be any portions of truth to it. It in and of itself, improving its personal validity, it carries no real scientifically measurable evidence that goes through the scientific method that we could actually argue upon. It more relegates itself to the space of just belief, and belief about how to explain something else is in the line of religion. Or we could just leave it at a hypothesis, an educated guess at our very best, to try not to give it that type of veneer, if you will, that kind of stinge, because a lot of people have an issue with religion, and I get it. But my point being is, in order to even define all these other spectrum genders, there has to be a gender to focus on, a primary source. And if you don't understand that, you don't understand gender at all. Because for it to be important to refer to you by different pronouns, if you will, then you'd have to understand the significance of the male-female gender and why it needs to be maintained. Because out of all was begotten out of the two, male and female. I don't know what any two-spirited gender that had begotten children. I've never heard of this. I don't know. We've never had. There's nothing. I don't know what that is. I'll be honest with you. Don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. You know. I get where it's gotten from. I mean, to me, the only thing I can't say that is just more of a hyper personal kind of position. It's more like your personality, like whatever that could mean. It's like kind of like developed out of who you personally are. So it's so hyper subjective that I just don't even seem like, if only 5 of you guys exist in the world, maybe it's just like, maybe you just got the same personality traits. Maybe that's not exactly a gender. I mean, like I said, I don't know. Like, I'm not here to define you guys, but I'm not here to be redefined either. You know, you don't get to like put cis in front of me and all this weird shit. That's your life. You know, you may need all of those other prefixes, and I'm okay with that. I don't want to stop you from needing they, it, their, zer, all of that. I don't want to stop you from that. You're not going to stop me from using he and she either. You know what I'm saying? So what are we going to do about that? You know, this is just professional language. I don't understand why I need to engage in some hyper-personal religious order. That's something that we should talk about hyper-personal. We'll deal with that in personal conversations. But any conversation at the job, we shouldn't even be discussing your gender pronouns. You're either a man or a woman. Why? Because we're just dealing with professionalism. For the same reason why you can't use slang at work. It's just not professional. It keeps it easy for everyone. It makes it easy. You shouldn't even be offended if someone says sir. You know what I mean? If you look like you were born a male and you clearly look like one. Because if you have to go on, if most anatomical men have to go under the knife and take hormone pills, a natural resources to fabricate your body to look more like who you say you are on the inside, then it would make sense why someone would make the mistake to refer to you as a man as soon as they see one. You didn't take all your meds. That's the reason why you take meds. If you could just throw on a dress and be a woman, then why is there industry for this? I mean, let's be realistic. Even if you guys are real people, you know, in terms of, you know what I mean, in terms of being born this way and all of that, it should still make sense how everyone still sees you on the outside. Otherwise, you would never be able to sell me your personal sob story if all you needed to do was throw on a dress and all of a sudden you was just the other sex. Come on now. It's an unfortunate position that you fell into this situation. But in order for you to know that you were in the wrong body. They would have to be a right body for you to belong into. So all you people with this gender spectrum have this, the way you come to your point of view null and voids transsexual people who, or transgender I should say, because that's something else. It null and voids who they are, because then there will be nothing to transition from one to another. It invalidates the point that you were ever in the wrong body to begin with, because no gender would exist, just your sex. And then you could argue, well, I'm in the wrong sex, but then we will have to go back to transsexual. And if you and if I have to deal with you on a level of transsexual, then anytime I speak to you as him, her, or anything, I'm only referring to you by your sex. And if I'm accurate there, then why are we even wasting time with this conversation to begin with? Look, man, it is what it is. Even when you say cis, you adhere to the gender that you assign to. It's like that means you acknowledge there are genders that we have, that we have to have. All right, cool. So if I was born a man, it would make logical sense that my gender would be a man. It would make more sense that for that to even be true, for there to be a male sex and a male gender, that would be your parent. And it would act itself out on a very biological way. That if anybody to not be aligned, female gender, male sex, male gender, female sex, no matter what, you would have to still be the minority for you to be in the wrong body. Because if you were the majority, then it would be rare to see a man act in the gender of a man and a woman act in the gender of a woman. And then transsexuals would have had their gender expression all the way fucked up. They'd have to be acting in the sex that they were born. Think about that. Fucked your head up. All of that to say, you're making life way more difficult than what it needs to be. You're becoming way more heady than you need to be. I feel like you use all these word sandwiches just to salads and sandwiches just to these large overextended words just so you can sound smarter than you already are, or to bullshit your way through to explain why you just feel inadequate. And maybe you feeling inadequate has a lot more to do with you and certain things you haven't come to terms with. And maybe that's something that we need to talk to more. Look inward about. And to accept about yourselves and about one another. Loose change. Bundy, 718.